How is everyone today? Good. I need your help. Some of you will want to participate in this and some of you won't. That's okay. But for those of you who do, I need you to stand up for a moment. Nobody? Really? Okay, go ahead, a couple. All right. So you're up. That's good. That's a good start. I don't know about you, kid. What are you, 15? You don't want to participate? Seriously? All right. Well, no, that's okay. No, you can sit back down. Now I want everybody to sit back down with her. Okay. Wait, I'll do it too. I don't want to ask you to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm sitting down. Now wait, now back up. Back up.
Did you say Simon Says?
Yeah, now we're going to go back down. One more time, we're going to go up. And then back down. So there, now the service is Lutheran. And everything we left out, we've now included. I am very excited to be here this morning. Thank you for having me. It means a lot. It's an honor to be able to speak with you. Every single Sunday, it really is an honor to be able to be here. I never take it for granted. You know, we only get so many days together. There's only so many. And I want to make each one of them count. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being here today. You know, you did it. You set an alarm clock, and you got out of bed, and you brushed your teeth, some of you. You got in your car, and you came here to this place for this. I hope I can make it worth your while. But some of that is up to you. I know that some of you sat there when we did the little exercise, standing and sitting, and you were like this. You're like, oh, I'm going to do it. Okay, you're probably not going to get much out of this. But that's on you, not me. You see, this is a participatory event. Church is a participatory event. I'm not talking about you, kid. You're fine. You only get out of this what you put into it. So I'm asking you to put something into it today. Here's my deal. Let's make a deal. I'm going to give you my very best. Not like second best or third best. I'm going to give you my very best this morning. Everything I've got. I hope next year I have more, but right now this is what I've got. I'm going to give it all to you this morning. But what I ask of you is for you to give me your very best too. Okay, so I want you all to reach into your pockets and pull out those cell phones and shut them off. Okay, shut them. I don't want them ringing during the sermon like last week. Can we do that? Shut them all off, because if it rains, I will call you out this morning. Nobody has an excuse. Shut them down. Mine's off. Okay, shut yours off too. I want you to put away all of your distractions, unfold your arms unless you're comfortable. I'm not blaming you. That's just how you sit. That's fine. But I mean, I want you to loosen up a little bit this morning. I'm going to preach for about an hour and a half. But we cut out all the liturgy, so, you know, that should be fine. Just hold on tight, because here we go. I wrote a book. How many of you knew that? Raise your hands. That's it? I've been here for 9 months. You didn't know that I wrote a book? Oh, my goodness. How is that possible? How's it? I didn't tell you. Did you do a Google search? I'm on Amazon. I've got people reviewing me. I had one guy who gave me a 1-star review, said it was the worst book he ever read. That's the kind of stuff you need to sell books. If nobody's hating on you, you're not doing it right. So you all go here to St. Paul's, and I'm your pastor, sort of. You should know that the guy wrote a book. And you should be telling your friends. I don't care. What do I make? Like 50 cents off of each book sold? It's not about the money. It's about an opportunity to say, hey, here's a message. We think you ought to hear it. Come on. I know that you don't want to darken the door of a church, but check this out and see what you think. I wrote a book. It's called Following the Rabbi. That's what it looks like right there. So you can all see it. Actually, the truth is, every year, I write enough to put out several books like Following the Rabbi. I just don't spend the time compiling, editing, and preparing that stuff for publishing because I have other distractions like you. Right? It's one thing to write a lot, it's another thing to lay it all out in a proper format for publishing so that it looks nice and everything's spelled correctly and lined up right. That's a whole different kind of thing. But maybe we can start a new ministry at St. Paul's. Maybe we can start St. Paul's Press. I mean, we've got a few readers, a few editors, some people who know how word processors work, and we can farm out things for printing. But with a little bit of determination, we could probably put out at least one of these a year. That'd be a pretty good outreach ministry, don't you think? Something to think about. But enough about books, and here's why. People don't read books. They just don't read books anymore. And if you are one of those people, then this morning, it's for you. Because I'm going to walk you through the major themes of the first chapter of my book, and hopefully you'll catch the flavor of it. Are you ready? Ready. Okay, here we go. I want to start out by talking about text messages. Anybody know what a text message is? Yeah, you do. Did you ever really want to get a hold of someone and you call them on the phone, but they don't pick up the phone? I mean, not you. You know, you've been on council and you serve as a liturgist, and so of course everybody picks up your calls. But the rest of you, did you ever try to call someone and they don't pick up the phone? I mean, sometimes you just get the answering machine, and then sometimes you get just a dial tone, right? They pick up the phone, they hear your voice, and they hang up real quick because they don't want to talk to you. Did you ever have that happen? I've had it happen. I've had it happen when trying to call some of you. A few minutes later, they send you a text message, and the text message says, "Hey, what's up? What's up?" You know what's up. I wanted to talk to you. Why are you hanging up on me? I mean, that's why I called you. I wanted to have a conversation with you. I don't want to pass little notes back and forth that I have to type with my stinking thumbs. I want to have a conversation. Can we agree that there is a difference between a text message and a conversation? Yes. Yes, of course there is. But then there's those times when you know you have to talk to someone, but you don't really want to. You know, somebody like your boss, or a bill collector, or maybe it's your kids. You know, people who want your time and your money. And they called and they want to talk to you, and you really know you should respond, but you don't want to talk to them. So what do? You send them a text. That's what you do. I know you do. Let's be clear about this. You send them a text because you don't want to talk to them. That's why you do it. I know that none of you have done that with anybody here. You always pick up the phone when you see it's them calling. Yeah, sure. Okay, here's the thing with texts. A lot of the time, they're very difficult to understand. I mean, let's say I text you. I say, "Hey, let's meet at Mike's." And so John and I, we're really familiar with meeting at the restaurant in town, Mike's Bar and Grill, right? We have not been compensated for this message. We might want to talk to Mike about that, right? And so you show up at Mike's on Front Street, and meanwhile, I'm at Mike King's house. And you're over there at the restaurant having a sandwich. Now, if we would have just had a conversation, We probably could have cleared this up and met at the same place. But you didn't want to meet me where I was. So you just took it at face value and went to the bar and had a beer. Probably wise of you. Here's the point. Text messaging is ambiguous. It is not always clear. I mean, how many times has somebody sent you a text and you say, what does this mean? What is this about? And so you write back, hey, what are you talking about here? And they send you a reply, but that doesn't make things any more clear. Nothing's more clear than it was in the first message. And so you write them back again, and back and forth you go again and again and again for half an hour. A half an hour of this. When a 2-minute conversation on the phone would have cleared everything up. Text messages are a terrible way of communicating. Everybody knows that, right? Can I get an amen? Mm-hmm. This includes Facebook and Twitter. You know that, right? These are terrible ways of communicating. We use them in the absence of other ways of communicating, but they are not primary. They are terrible ways of communicating. Please get off Facebook and Twitter. With people that you know in real life, have a conversation with them face to face. That's the only way to do it. Don't get me wrong, text messages are good for some things. But for real communication, for real relationship building, for communicating the things that matter the very most, we need those messages to be clothed in flesh and blood. The words have to become flesh. If they're going to have any real importance, the words have to be embodied. I'm saying that a text message is not the same as sitting down with someone and having dinner with them. Anybody have dinner with the pastor in the last month?
Yeah.
So few of you.
Yeah.
Okay, it was different, right? Yeah, it was different. We need that stuff. So there's this old Jewish book written by a rabbi by the name of John. And the name of the book is, wait for it, The Gospel According to John. Yeah. It's a book of the Christian scriptures in the Bible, but it is first and foremost a piece of ancient Jewish literature written by an ancient Jewish rabbi. And in it, this rabbi says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And this Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We've seen His glory. In the beginning was the text message. In the beginning was a thought, an idea, a blueprint, a design, a word. And this text message, this word, it became a flesh and blood human being who sat down with us, who talked with us, who ate bread with us, who drank wine with us. And that's how we knew that this word was really something special. So we've got this new technology, right? We can send text messages with the flick of a thumb. But the problem that we're discovering is text messages are a terrible way of having a conversation with someone. Well, they had that figured out 2,000 years ago. This is not news. Text messages are awful. They don't work. Text messages, ideas, plans, intentions, thoughts, prayers, they don't mean a thing until they become flesh. Until someone takes up that word and lives it out. It's just dead letters on a page. That's all it is. Until someone breathes life into the word and says, let there be life. It's just a lump of clay. Reference to Genesis, Adam, creation. You get it. What's important is that the words become flesh. That someone embodies the text. That someone shows up and talks with you and eats bread with you and drinks wine with you. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? Anybody? Here's where the ancient Jewish rabbis enter, okay? The ancient rabbis believed that the reason the Jewish people, the people of Israel, the reason that they existed was to bring God's blessings to the world. They were convinced that they would do this by showing the world a better way to live, maybe the best way to live. They believed that the best way to live had been handed down to them by a man named Moses in a compilation of history and teaching that they called the Torah. Now, we sometimes translate that word Torah as law, but it would probably be better understood as instruction or as the royal decree of a king. The king might say something like this, like, I cherish you, I value you, I appreciate your service. Now that wasn't a command, but it was Torah. It was the voice of the king. It was Torah. So for the Jewish people, living their best life meant living out the Torah, following it, being shaped by it, living by its light. They believed in some sense that the Torah was divinely inspired, that all of these stories were handed down to Moses on a mountain by God himself. And whether or not these ancient people believed that literally, that's a matter of debate. But we know that they took that seriously. The trouble is, following the Torah was a bit of a challenge. You should laugh at this picture now, because he's cross-eyed. When you look at the Bible, aren't there a lot of difficult things in it? Aren't there things in the Bible that are difficult to understand? How many of you have read Leviticus? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, and the rest of you have skipped it because you really know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of stuff in there that's hard to understand. One of the problems is there's not just one way to read it all. I mean, it's a text message. It's difficult. A lot of it is pretty ambiguous. For example, if the Torah told a story about an ancient Jewish warrior killing all of Israel's enemies, did that mean that Jewish warriors should rise up today and start kicking butt? Is that what it meant? Or should they wait for a sign in the future to do that? Or should they forego violence altogether? Who's to say? Or how about this? The Torah said, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the seventh day, that is a Sabbath to the Lord. And on that day, you shall not do any work. For those of you paying attention, that is a commandment. One of the big 10. Anybody know which one? 3. Here's how we say 3 in America. Here's how they say it in Germany. You see the difference? 3? 3. So if you're ever overseas, you know how to do it. It's a big commandment, huge one. What did this commandment mean? What did it mean? What was work? Was work just doing your job? I have been hired by St. Paul's to preach on our Sabbath day. This is the day that I do my work. Am I breaking the commandment? If you fetched a pail of water for a stranger, was that work? What if a tree fell down overnight and you cut it up and you gathered all of the sticks out of your yard? Was that work? Or what if your big dumb ox fell into a well, like big dumb oxes do sometimes, and you had to pull it out on the Sabbath day? Was that work? What if your son fell into a hole? And there he is down there in the hole. And you love him. I mean, not like the other son, but this son you love. What if you pull him out? Is that work? Nobody's a soccer fan? The guy's name is Son. That's really should have elicited a lot more laughter, but that's all right. We've got the Torah, right? We've got the words. We've got the text message. But what does it look like when it's lived out? Here's where the rabbis came in. Here's where they came in. The rabbis were the ones who embodied the Torah. They were the ones who just devoted their lives to the study of the Torah. And in conversation with their people, they provided guidance and insight onto how to live the Torah out. They taught people not just, with their words, but with their lives. They showed what the Torah looked like in action. They showed the people what a good life looked like, or at least they tried. Now, different rabbis had different ways of living out the Torah. There were different schools of thought about what living the Torah out looked like. One rabbi had this interpretation, another rabbi had this interpretation. One rabbi lived this way, another lived this way. A rabbi's way of living out the Torah. A rabbi's school of thought. A rabbi's way of clothing these words in flesh was known as the rabbi's yoke. Right? So you put a yoke on the oxen, and then they can pull the cart. So the yoke of the rabbi, the way of living out the Torah, right? This is called the yoke. The best and the most popular rabbis, they developed huge followings. People would come from miles around to hear them teach and to learn from the way that they lived their lives. And the rabbis believed that it was their job to pass on their yoke, their particular way of teaching the Torah to the next generation, because at any point, the faith of the people was only one generation from being forgotten and dying out. Can anybody here relate to that? You really better speak up a little bit louder. Can anybody here relate to that?
Yes.
Okay. The rabbis did not want that to happen. So, only the very best and the brightest could become rabbis. Now, it wasn't until the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 that the practice of apprenticeship became very, very formalized. But the seeds for that much more formalized rabbinical school, they were there in seed form much earlier, even during the time of Jesus. And during that time, most of the Jewish people made sure that their children would study with a rabbi, right? I mean, we do that here at this church. We have our kids study with the catechists, right? Learn the catechism, be confirmed, that whole thing. We do that. Well, they did it then too. And their hope was that their sons, I'm sorry, it was just sons at that time, but their hope was that their sons would become rabbis too, because there was nothing more important than passing on the faith to the next generation. And they did that with the male children. So if your son became a rabbi, that was something to be proud of. in the later rabbinical schools, at about 6 years old, this kid is 6. Okay, so in case you've never seen a 6-year-old before, here's what they look like. At about 6 years old, parents presented their child for study. And the first grade or level was called Bet Sefer, which means house of the book. And between the ages of 6 and about 10, children spent their time memorizing the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Memorized. I don't mean just the names of the books. I mean the books. Do you have a Bible in front of you? Open it up. Look at those books. See how much is in them. That's what kids between the ages of 6 and 10 used to learn by heart. And the kids in the catechism classes here think that it's tough. Because I want them to memorize like the 6 pages of Martin Luther's catechism. Give me a break. But you know what? I listen to the radio with my kid, and she's 9. And she seems to know the words to every song on the radio. Is it really all that astonishing that they used to memorize the Torah? Or do maybe we just put our emphasis in different places today? Maybe. Well, forget about that. Let's look at this kid. How old do you figure he is? He's 10. Yeah. He's 10. The next grade, or grade level, was called Bet Talmud, or the House of Learning. Between the ages of about 10 and, say, 14, the children who did well in the first grade, they moved on to the second grade. And they spent their time studying the wisdom of the ancient rabbis. And they also memorized the rest of the Bible. Genesis to Malachi. Memorized. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? Not everyone made it. I would not have made it. You would not have made it. None of us here would have made it. I mean, some people just don't have the aptitude for that sort of thing. When a kid hit the wall, when they flunked out, the rabbi would tell the kid, okay, look, you can't be a rabbi. But you see what your dad's doing over there? Go do what he does. You can't do this, but go do that. Like maybe you could be a shepherd. Go tend to the sheep. Or maybe you could be a carpenter. Know any Christian carpenters? You can't make it as a teacher of our religion. Go be a carpenter. You can't make it, so go be a fisherman. Go do that. Well, the next grade, this was called Bet Midrash. This was the house of study, and the kids who showed some aptitude, some desire, they would say to the rabbi, they would say, I would like to be your disciple. And this meant that they wanted to take up the rabbi's yoke. They wanted to be like the rabbi was. They wanted to follow the rabbi. And if the rabbi thought that the kid could do it, he would say, come follow me. Come follow me. The kid would leave the house of his mother and his father, and he would become a disciple of the rabbi, and he would follow the rabbi wherever he went, learning everything that he could from him. And some disciples followed the rabbi for 15 years or more, all so that they could become rabbis too. Well, in the first century Judea, by the age of 15 or so, The boys were either in training under a rabbi in order to become a rabbi, or they had already washed out of the program. At that point, they would become apprentices under their dad until they were ready to take on the family business. So this formalized system of Bet Sefer and Bet Talmud and Bet Midrash, that wasn't fully developed until the early, to the later part of the first century after the fall of the temple in Jerusalem. But the seeds were there already during the time of Jesus. Which brings us to Luke chapter 5, which was our gospel for this morning. Jesus, he sees these fishermen washing their nets. And he gets into one of the boats, and he tells the guide, put out into the sea and let down the nets. And Simon, the guy who's working the boat, he says, well, this is nuts. I mean, I've been fishing all my life. And last night we fished until, the early hours of the morning. We didn't catch anything. But okay, Jesus, since it's you and you're saying it, I'll do it. And he lets down the nets. And wouldn't you know it, fish start to pile into the nets to the point where they start to break. And Simon calls out to his friends, James and John, and they come over and they start to haul in the fish. And there's so many that the boats start to sink. And Simon realizes that he's in the presence of greatness. And he says, Jesus, go away because I'm not worthy. And Jesus tells him, Simon, come follow me, because from now on you will be catching people. Do you see what's going on here? Can you see it? The Gospels of Matthew and Mark tell us that James and John were in the boat with their father, Zebedee. That means that they were very likely teenagers, learning to fish with their dad. That is, they were learning the family business. Simon might have been a little bit older. Maybe he was 20, 21, 22, 23. But basically, these were boys, and they were fishing. That means that they weren't studying the Torah. They were not training to be rabbis. They were fishing. They were learning the family business. What does that mean? It means that they were washouts. It means that they didn't have what it took to take up the yoke of a rabbi. No rabbi thought that they could do it. But then along comes Jesus, and he says, come, follow me. I'm going to be your rabbi, and you are going to be my disciples. You are going to show people a better way to live. You are going to teach people how to be good and godly and loving and kind and human. You're going to follow me, and you're going to be catching people. When a rabbi picked someone to be his disciple, he was expressing a belief that under his guidance, the student could learn what he knew. The disciple could live like he lived. He could do what he did. He could take up his yoke. Jesus was telling Simon and James and John, you can do it. You can do it. Come follow me. You're capable of this. And they did. They did. I mean, they left their boats and left everything they had, and they followed him, and they changed the world. These teenage boys, these nobodies, these washouts, these dropouts, They did it. So can you. You can do it too. These stories in the Bible, they weren't just written so that we can look back and say, wow, weren't those guys great? They were written to remind you of what you can do if only you will try. And I am a little bit disappointed that I didn't get more laughs on this one. All of this reminds me a little bit about that, we're hearing a story about Peter in a boat. And I'm reminded this last week about another story of Peter in a boat. He's out on the Sea of Galilee with his friends in the boat when a storm kicks up. And out in the distance they see a figure, a ghost. Maybe it's a man walking on the water. And they look and they see, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. And Peter calls out to Jesus saying, hey, if that's you, Jesus, tell me to come out to you, and I will. And Jesus says, come on out. Come on out on the water. You can do it. And Peter hops out of the boat, and he walks on the water. Just like Jesus, Peter does what Jesus is doing. And then he sees the wind and the waves. And he gets scared. And he starts to sink. And he cries out, Lord, Lord, save me, save me. And Jesus does. He reaches down and he saves him. And then he asks, oh, Peter, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Here's the question. Who did Peter doubt? Was it Jesus? No, right? Jesus is fine. He's walking on the water. Everything's cool. Who did Peter doubt?
Himself.
Himself. Yes. He did not think that he could do what Jesus was doing. He didn't think that he could do it. But he could. I mean, he just did. He got out of the boat and he was walking on the water. He could do it. Peter could do it. And so can you. You can. If you take anything away from this morning, anything at all, I hope that you will remember that you can walk on water. You can do it. You can make a difference in this world. You can do something good. You can live a life worth remembering. You can improve somebody else's life. You can feed hungry school kids with a few bucks in a basket. You can do it. You can be somebody's hero. You can help out at Vacation Bible School and be somebody's vision of what it means to be a hero. You can be somebody's role model. You can be a saint. You can. You might not think that you're good enough. You might not think that you can do it, but you can. You can do it. You can walk on water. I mean, just think of what 12 misfit teenagers and young men did. Think about it. Were they the best? They weren't. I mean, were they like the cream of the crop, the top of their class? No, they weren't. Well, I mean, you don't have to be a genius either. Thank God. 'Cause most of us aren't, right? You don't have to be. You don't need to be able to debate the minutia of the Torah. You don't need to be able to memorize the whole Bible. You don't need to even be particularly religious. You can follow Jesus. You can live like he did. You can live a life of justice and mercy and compassion and forgiveness and love. You can do it. Don't doubt yourself. Just have a little faith. Being a Christian, changing the world, following Jesus, it's not terribly complicated. It's really not. It's not about memorizing Bible verses. It's not about keeping the rules. It's not even about going to church. It's about love. It's really, really simple. It's about love. And let me tell you, you can do it. You can follow the Rabbi. I know that you can. Because those 12 misfits and morons, most of them did. And they changed the whole world. You can do it. You can follow the Rabbi. So, thanks for following along with me for a little bit this morning.